Hey, on this week's episode, we're going to talk with Mr. Chadd Caldwell. He is a pastor at Mount Olive Baptist Church here in the Bolivar, Missouri area. He also is a professor here at SBU, and so we're going to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that go along with bivocational ministry. Welcome back to the Speak Life podcast. Welcome back to the Speak Life podcast. This week, I'm going to be talking with Mr. Chadd Caldwell, who teaches here at SBU, but also has been pastoring for how many years at this point?
About 2 years.
All right, so a couple years now, and have a chance to talk about just, again, some of the challenges that we see and experience. Chadd, you doing all right today?
Doing good.
All right. Talk a little bit about your family, your history and ministry.
Well, okay. I'm originally from Pennsylvania, my wife and I,
Right.
and we had been teachers out that way, and we were looking for new jobs, and we ended up out here in the Ozarks, and that was kind of for us a big move. I won't want to say it's cross-cultural, but it sure feels like it sometimes.
No, you can say that. I'm from Maryland. It's cross-cultural a little bit.
But we love it out here. But I had been interested in pursuing the ministry, felt called to at least pursue some education and see where the Lord was leading us. And so when we were back in Pennsylvania, I did a few years at seminary and loved it. And then the question was I pursuing a pastoral position or was I pursuing an academic position? And lo and behold, I'm doing both.
Yeah.
So,
which I think the vast majority of churches in the Southern Baptist Convention do have bivocational pastors. So this is not outside the norm at all.
Right.
We have a whole lot of churches who are smaller and not really, running 300, 400 people. They're running 40, 50 people sometimes, 20 people sometimes, and can't afford a pastor full time. So with that being said, I think there's a lot of value in being able to talk through what ministry looks like in that context. So I keep forgetting you're from Pennsylvania. Where in Pennsylvania exactly are you from?
South Central Pennsylvania,
Okay.
a little town called Weigelstown. It's
Okay.
in York County. And I tell everybody, York County was for about 24 hours the first capital of the United States.
Yeah.
Depending on who you ask.
Yeah.
But it's also the home of York peppermint patties and Harley Davidson.
All kinds of fun stuff. Now, there's actually the name of the area that always made me laugh when I was a middle school kid. Isn't that where Intercourse, Pennsylvania is?
Over in Lancaster.
It's at Lancaster.
Yeah, maybe an hour away or so.
Yeah, so I spent summers going to Lancaster just about every single summer. So I spent a lot of time up there in that area of Amish country, traveling straight through York to get up there. So.
All right. Well, I lived in Lancaster for a while too, so
okay.
I did my undergrad over there.
Oh, okay, very cool. Over at Lancaster Bible?
Well, I did my undergrad at Millersville University.
Oh, okay.
And then I did Lancaster Bible College for seminary much more recently.
Yeah, very nice. Very nice. All right. Well, with all that being said, what we really typically talk about have to do with challenges in ministry. So with the experiences you've had in ministry, things you've either experienced yourself or things you've seen other people experience, what would you say are some of the bigger challenges that you've seen or experienced in ministry?
Well, going back just to seminary, actually, I remember one of the things that a lot of the pastors used to say all the time that I was taking classes with. They would say something like, well, they don't teach you that in seminary. But maybe that's a good thing. Seminary is not there to teach you everything. But,
right.
For me, I think the struggle, first of all, it's not really been a struggle. The church is great, but it does have challenges.
Right.
And one of the hard things is just in a small church, you've got with a very small congregation, but it's a larger facilities. It used to be a larger church, much more people. And so you've got to figure out how to manage all those facilities and upkeep on an aging building. And, we had we call it the the near global flood. We were promised there won't be
Yeah.
any more global floods, but we had, we just had some water damage. A pipe burst, and it
Gotcha.
took about a year to get it all squared away. And so you're trying to figure out, first of all, in the immediate time when I show up at the church, oh, look, hey, there's waterfalls coming out of the ceiling. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Am I going to get shocked when I walk through 6 inches of water to go try to figure out how to turn the water off? And I'm on the phone calling people, how do you turn the water off? So you just have the logistics of that. And then you've got to figure out, well, who's going to deal with the insurance?
Yeah.
Well, it falls to the pastor, I think, probably more times than not. And so I'm dealing with the insurance company for a year. And then in the meantime, 2 of the HVAC systems conk out.
Yeah.
Then the third one conks out. And so, this past year we spend, for a small church, really an exorbitant amount of money just trying to keep the building intact.
Yeah.
And so at some point you got to start thinking, the hard questions is, well, how much of this building do we keep if we're not going to grow?
Yeah.
What do we focus on?
Wow. So we're really talking about a couple of problems wrapped up in one. Challenges that are there when you're a smaller church, especially when you're I won't say a shrinking church, but a church that has shrunk, right? And so not necessarily continuing to get smaller, but we're in one place now in another. How do you deal with the upkeep of a larger facility with a smaller congregation and so a smaller amount of funds? Just some very practical issues that a pastor would deal with they don't teach in seminary.
Yeah. So that for me, that was a big surprise, because I'm thinking, okay, you go do all your seminary training, you do your theology training and whatnot, and lo and behold, you have all these practical things. You're not just going in preaching, and you've got to take care of the flock in multiple ways. I still think my primary duty is to preach and teach the word and pray for the church and whatnot, and that's where I spend most of my time. But there's this other added element, and so it's been I'm learning about how to govern a church, in the sense of, I don't know if govern's the right word, but we're thinking through, okay, well, who's on what committee and what are the responsibilities of the committee? Let's review what the Constitution says and make sure everybody's pulling their part, that kind of thing, and trying to encourage people to do what it is they're kind of voted in to do. And we have it's a great congregation. I love them very much, and they love the church. They have gone through, I guess, some hard times, and which is why it is smaller now. But they're the ones they've really stuck it out, and they're solid. They're there. They're not going anywhere. And so now, but at the same token, most of them are the behind the scenes type, which is good. That's not a bad thing,
right?
But they're not out doing a lot of evangelism. They're not like on a spiritual side, as far as preparation for ministry, it's been one of my goals is to just kind of keep working with them to say, hey, listen, if you really do love this church, you're going to need to be getting out of your comfort zone and reaching the lost, inviting people to church. We've seen some growth. It's been good, but we really need to see some more. We're attracting some people, and but the church, the main portion of the congregation isn't getting any younger. We do have some young ones,
which
but
I think
the ones that really financially support,
which I think is the case with a lot of our smaller churches.
So, but there's signs of real genuine hope for the future, and we've got a number of years in us, regardless. So we'll see what the Lord wants with us. I think the Lord isn't done with us. So I'm excited about what He has in store. Just not sure what it is.
But part of what, as I hear you talking about, so the people who are there still are the people who are motivated. They want to see the church succeed, but it doesn't change the fact that here's what I'm thinking about, right? I don't know if you ever took a class on like administrative leadership in ministry or anything like that. That was one of the classes I remember from when I was in seminary. And one of the things we talked about was that there are basically, we can think of 6 functions of a church, right? We can think of ministry, we can think of worship, we can think of discipleship, we can think of fellowship, we can think of evangelism, and then we can think of missions. You could probably tie evangelism and missions together into one, but it's really those 6 different functions of the church. And it occurs to me that if you have, a solid core group of people, well, the vast majority of them are geared for ministry, or the vast majority of them are geared toward discipleship. Well, those are really good things to have happening to help people grow and to meet needs. But if you don't have people who are geared toward evangelism, then reaching out and seeing the church grow is going to be a challenge. Which at the same time, if you've got a bunch of people that are really geared toward evangelism and hardly anybody that's really geared toward discipleship, so let's tell people about Jesus. We don't really know how to teach them anything and help them to grow up in their faith after that, but we can at least do this first part. Well, that also comes with challenges, right? And so I like the way you worded it, the idea of helping people to think about getting outside of that comfort zone. And some of it, I think, just takes some time to think through, some analyzing who exactly do we have.
Yeah. I like the expression, salt's all wonderful and great, but it's got to get out of the shaker sometimes.
Yeah.
And I let them know. I kind of tease them a little and say, guys, you're all very salty, you're well preserved, but we got to get out of the shaker a little bit.
Yeah.
Again, they're really wonderful. Yeah. You have this promise in Mark, Jesus talking about if you leave your family for his sake, for the sake of the gospel, that kind of scenario, then you're going to be richly blessed, hundredfold. And there's also going to be some persecution, yet there's eternal life at the end of it all. One of the things that we felt actually moving out here to the Ozarks is, we were leaving all of our family behind, and it was a tough scenario. And unfortunately, in this day and age, we can really keep good contact with them. We're constantly flying back.
Yeah.
I tease my wife all the time about not really wanting to go back so often. We go back twice a year. But man, we have, honestly, both of us, we've talked about it a number of times. We feel so blessed that we do feel like we've landed into this family. That's the real blessing. And quite frankly, I've been in large churches and small churches, and I love both scenarios. Nothing against any of them, but we've never felt closer to a family outside of our immediate, actually flesh and blood family. But a spiritual family, we've never felt this close before.
Yeah, wow.
And I think that was God, quite frankly, fulfilling that promise that we hear about in Mark. And so that's been, I hate to say it, almost a surprise. You think by now you would trust the Bible a little bit, but it was sort of like it was fulfilled in a way that was, it just when it actually started happening, it was better than I kind of anticipated.
Yeah, no, and I tell you what, I get that. I also, it's not lost on me, and I don't mean to offend anyone in the way I'm about to word this, but it's not lost on me. So I also experienced it as a little bit of a surprise, that feeling of deeper connection. It's not lost on me that you and I both moved here from the East Coast. People are different. When we think about what people are like in general on the East Coast versus people in the Midwest, I know I lived in Texas for a while and experienced some of the same thing, which it's just different. And I don't think that there's another way there's no getting around that is one of the differences in place. But one of the things that you're talking about there makes me think of, a lot of pastors out there, they're not typically pastoring in their hometown, right? They have moved away, and you and I are in, an interesting spot in terms of generationally. We've got parents who are aging and kids who still have needs, right? And so it's commonly referred to when you hit this kind of middle adulthood age bracket of being referred to as the sandwich generation, right? We've got people on both ends that we're trying to think through, how do we deal with the needs that are going on? How do I deal with the needs my kids have? I've moved 900 miles away from where my parents are. and my in-laws. My kids have their own things going on as far as school and the busyness that they have with their schedules. And at the same time, I've got parents back home that are aging, and I'm starting to have additional concerns about their health as they're dealing with their own health concerns that happen as people age. How do you balance dealing with all that at the same time? Right? I mean, that's one of the challenges
Yeah.
that we face.
Yeah, well, I mean, I feel that it's going to probably become more pressing in coming years. Right now, my parents are still, they're independent. They've had their fair health problems for sure, but
Yeah.
they're still able to take care of themselves. Um, and so, as that changes, it's going to be a different dynamic. And fortunately, I have family, brothers, and their spouses and families that still live close to my parents that can help out. And so does my wife, her family. She has
Yeah.
two brothers and their families that are all living close by. So that's certainly a comforting thing on my part being this far away, because it would be hard I think for me in particular, and I think probably my wife, if
Yeah.
there was anybody there to take care of them in the coming years. Um, it would. I'm not sure where that'll lead. As of right now, I feel confident that I'm right where I belong. You know, um, but yeah, taking care of the kids. That's another one of the blessings actually coming out here. That was, quite frankly, was surprised how well it turned out. They're over at Polk
Yeah.
County Christian School,
Yep.
and my wife teaches there, and it is an amazing school. The teachers are fantastic. I wouldn't honestly, I can't think of anywhere else I'd rather my kids be.
Yeah.
And I didn't expect that. I didn't know what we were getting ourselves into moving out here with, how my kids are going to be educated and taken care of and everything. And
Yeah.
it just worked out fantastic. They all love the school. My daughter's turning into a teenager, so sometimes she, would rather not
Yeah.
have to get up in the morning to go to school.
Understood.
But at the end of the day, I think she really does have a sense of understanding about how wonderful it is that they can go to a school that they can talk about Jesus. They can learn
Yeah.
that the standards are high there. They've got to work for their grade, um, and simultaneously they can be open about their faith, and they go to chapel, and
Yeah.
they have Bible class. I mean, it's wonderful.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah.
Yeah. So my kids are a little bit older than yours. I can't. What grade are your
Oh, you're really pressing me now, right now.
Yeah.
Fourth and eighth.
Okay, so fourth and eighth.
Forgive me if I'm telling that wrong, kids. It changes every year. I can't keep.
Yes,
I can't keep up with it.
That is true.
And my son is actually in my wife's class this year, and
I don't know whether to say poor son or poor wife.
Well, it's working out really well,
Yeah.
but my daughter was in that situation a few years ago, and we weren't sure how it was going to.
Yeah.
But in both situations, it seems to be working out really well. But
Yeah,
I was quite frankly a little nervous about that scenario.
Well, yeah, you always wonder how's it going to go, because if the kid's frustrated about something that happened in school, they can't come home and complain to parents because that's where the teacher lives. So there's some extras that go along with that I'm sure any of you who are doing homeschooling completely understand in even more ways, because home is also where the classroom is, and so there's extras with that. My kids are a little bit older than yours. My youngest is a senior in high school this year. But we did find one of the same things when we moved here. It's the idea of, so we put our kids in the public school here. My wife and I both have some background in teaching in public school, and just felt that was important, that it was the way we wanted to do things. But a whole bunch of the teachers between the intermediate school and the middle school and the high school here also are members at my church, and so there's a pretty strong influence that makes me pretty happy with.
Out of all the places in the world, maybe this quite frankly would be one of the areas where I'd feel pretty comfortable sending my kids to public schools if I had to. And I grew up in a public school system. I don't really have anything strongly against it or anything, but there are places in the world, schools in the world, where I couldn't in good conscience send my kids.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Around here, I know an awful lot of the teachers, or at least know about them, and I know where they're going to church, and I generally trust what's going on. Where I don't have that trust maybe say out of state and other schools.
Yeah. No,
So
I
it's
completely agree and completely understand. Yeah. All of that kind of tying back into, for anybody who's going through pastoring when they're, kind of in the general age range where we are, and you're dealing with, okay, I can see parents are aging and there might be some health issues there. I also have kids here. And both of those things are separate from the church ministry that you're responsible for and dealing with all of those extra. There's the opportunity for a whole lot of time to be consumed, right? So can you talk a little bit about, because it's not for you, it's pretty, I'm not saying this well, for you, you're bivocational. You have two jobs that you're balancing along the way there.
Yeah.
As I think, many of our listeners would be, if the stats are holding true based on Southern Baptist Convention, how many are bivocational? There's a whole lot of people listening that are in the same boat that you would be in. And so what have you found has been beneficial in terms of just balancing your time?
Yeah. Get up in the morning and work on your sermon right after the kids leave before you have to get to your day job.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So with my particular scenario, with this church, I think they're very understanding, where they're not expecting, generally speaking, they're not expecting way too much from me where I can manage things. It could get to be, I think, a very rough kind of scenario in a lot of churches where, everyone knows that, hey, the bivocational means you're working 2 full-time jobs, but you're only getting paid for 1 full-time job, and that does happen. But they're very understanding of both myself and, quite frankly, my wife. A lot of times the spouse of the pastor is, the other full-time employee kind of thing. And they're not, they're very understanding and not pressuring her, and just, they've allowed her to kind of find her own niche in ministry wise within the church, and not expecting way too much. So it's been easy for me on that level, I think, compared to what it would be for a lot of other pastors, just because I think there's a level of understanding, partly because we have a wonderful couple in the church that was really doing an awful lot of the leadership, and he's a retired pastor. And so he knows, and his wife knows. And so there's been, I think, quite frankly, a certain amount of education and some protection there to make sure things aren't overwhelming for us as we come in.
Well, what you're talking about is exactly what I was thinking about. The idea of if somebody is in a church where there's not that level of understanding, there's a need to provide that level of education, to help them understand, hey, this is where we are. This is what we are capable of. Let's process together where we want to go, so that if you're wanting more from the pastor, we can afford to hire somebody, myself included in the list, who would be the full-time pastor and not have to have a bivocational role, so there's more time available.
So but it is, having said that, you do have to carve out time. And with my job at the university, the way I carve out my time changes every semester. As I figure out when my class schedules don't change that much, but generally speaking, I tend to be more of a morning person.
Good for you.
And so,
that's not me.
Well, it has to do with caffeine. That's when I'm allowed to drink caffeine.
Yeah,
so
I completely understand.
But I feel pretty good about getting up, and once the chaos because my wife teaches, she's taking the kids early, I usually get at least an hour every morning where I can sit and study and dig in to a sermon. A couple days a week anyway, depending on if I have an 8 o'clock class at the university, then it's a little less time. But and then just my Friday afternoons, fortunately, have been fairly open, so I can dig back in Fridays, and I really try to carve out Saturday to just be at home and be lazy with the family, or do things with the family, or projects. But it usually doesn't work. Usually Saturday morning, I'm up plowing through my stuff when everybody else is either sleeping or the kids get up and play a little Minecraft or something. I always joke with my family and friends, and I'm like, okay, soundproof headphones, the big ones that electronically also cancel out the sound, and then
Yep.
a white noise app, some of the best creations on planet
Yeah.
Earth. I have
Yep.
my
They're pretty
little
helpful.
sort of like cocoon of a private office right in my lazy boy where my kids are making noise. And if there's something really pressing, I'm right there and I can stop if I have to. But generally
Yeah.
speaking, I can tune stuff out those Saturday mornings
Yeah.
for a bit and get work done.
Yeah. That's
So
fantastic.
that's honestly, it might sound silly, but man, soundproof
No.
headphones with white noise on your phone app goes a long way
Yeah.
for giving yourself an extra hour or two a day to
So
work.
I kind of want to tease some of that out a little bit. So one of the things we just talked about was, so how do you negotiate this when you've got all the busyness of one job and the busyness of the church? Well, in one, you educate your folks at the church so they know.
Yep.
Two, you find what works for you. So that schedule is going to be different for everybody, right? Like you said,
Mhm.
you're a morning person, caffeine fueled morning person. I have plenty of caffeine, and I don't know that I can still describe myself as a morning person. Uh, Regardless, I found some things that work for me where I'll maybe work on some things later. I'm in a better spot in the afternoon. In the evenings, I will work on some things at home, or still be in here sometimes in the evenings, just depending. But then along with that, having some intentionally set boundaries to be able to go, I'm going to carve out this time where I'm going to make sure I've got time away from those jobs with my family, which we can even extrapolate that a little bit. I wonder if this is a little bit hermeneutically challenging in what I'm about to say, and I get that before it comes out of my mouth. Uh, I wonder if we can take our modern understanding of boundaries and say that's kind of what God was doing in the establishment of the Sabbath. That there are times when we are supposed to take a rest, where we are supposed to take a break from all the other things we're doing. That matters. That's important because God certainly didn't do that because he was tired, right? He was telling us
Yeah.
this is how you need to do it.
Well, I mean, I'm an art professor. I think recreation is incredibly important.
Yeah,
So, I mean, I don't like to pronounce it that way. I like to say recreation.
right.
It's this idea that I need to step back from all the things that I'm doing for, quite frankly, so much of it's self-preservation, preservation of my family, and just let God work on me. And
Yeah,
so, like real true recreation,
yeah,
and that might look different for different people too. But for me, just spending time with the family, like,
yeah,
or we have a gym over at the church. Grab the basketball, go over with Peter, my son,
yeah,
and play some basketball and get a little exercise, right?
yeah,
But it's gives you kind of a spiritual mental break, and he absolutely loves it.
yeah. That I know for me, there have been times where I've met my kids where they are when they're in the middle of playing Minecraft. I'll jump on with them and play some
Yeah,
Minecraft
I
with them.
usually try to avoid it, but every now and then I'll
Yeah,
surprise them and jump on and play with them
yeah,
for a little bit, and
yeah. Which, if you're
the
not
zombies
familiar,
get me every time.
yeah, yeah. Minecraft is basically a video game version of Legos. I think in a lot of ways, you're taking
Yeah,
stuff apart and putting it together, that kind of thing. But yeah, just finding those ways to intentionally carve out that time, I think, is hugely important. It's something that
yeah.
we have to do.
Well, and being a university professor, I got more time over the summer, good chunk of time over
Yeah,
the winter. We have more breaks than someone like a typical blue collar, that might
yeah,
have 3 weeks a year, 2 weeks a year, even vacation time. And so that's very helpful for me to kind of recharge batteries.
yeah,
But you can't go for months on end. You still have to carve out time in the middle of the week, or
yeah,
at the end of the day, we believe that Jesus is our Sabbath rest.
yep,
But we still need like our physical bodies need to be restored. And so, my wife teases me, but man, I'll go to bed early. I have no qualms about going to bed at
yeah,
8:30. And she's kind of the opposite. She'll stay up forever working, and then prefer to sleep in the morning.
yeah. I,
But if I'm tired, I heard this when a couple of years back where I guess there's studies that prove this. I don't know if they're true or not, but it
Mhm.
works for me. Where they say if you sleep in an hour ahead of time, rather, in other words, go to bed an hour early,
Right.
it is far more beneficial than sleeping in the morning, because you're waking up and your
Yeah.
body's not really in the REM, whatever,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
because you've got that kind of clock going. And so, but if you get to bed early, you'll hit the REM sooner and stay in it longer. And
Yeah.
then you'll wake up at your natural time in the morning. I don't know if that's
Mm.
true or not, but whatever. It seems to work for me.
Yeah. Yeah. There's probably is some truth. I mean, the thing that I immediately think of is just you're building your own circadian rhythm and the one that works the best for you in that 24-hour cycle every day.
Yeah.
Which, people function in different ways. Some people function better in the mornings than others, and all that. You actually described my marriage as gender opposite. My wife will go to sleep earlier, and I will not usually. But again, you find what works for you, and you do it. So I think this has been. We're actually pretty much at that time. This has been really valuable conversation because it's so crucial to make sure that we're doing the things we need to do to take care of ourselves so that we can take care of the people we're responsible for and meet them where they are and do the things that God's calling us to do. And so I think this has been a really beneficial conversation. Are there any last things you would mention as we're kind of signing off?
I don't know if I have anything in particular. I appreciate the opportunity to meet with you.
Yeah, glad to do it.
And,
Yeah.
I appreciate the ministry you have, where you're, quite frankly, I guess, caring for pastors and stuff. And I think that's an important thing. There's an awful lot of burnout out there.
There is,
and
there's not a whole lot of people doing this, so I'm glad to be able to do it. So
thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, and thank you for being here with me today. Thank you for tuning in and listening, and we'll have another episode for you next week. God bless.